Stones and Saka are in. Livramento and Madueke are out. Welcome to the England pod. We're all England all the time. It's Ali and Dave reacting to Thomas Tuchel's latest squad announcement for games against Wales in a friendly and then Latvia away. And that's the news when it comes to who's in and out. Of course, the talking points revolve around those who have not been added or re-added to the squad, mainly in the form of Jude Bellingham, Phil Foden, Jack Grealish and Adam Wharton-Dave. But Tuchel very clear that he essentially made one simple decision when choosing this squad, and that was to give those who very notably beat Serbia 5-0 in Serbia a chance to reconnect and go again.
Yeah, we're starting to see a more consistent selection now from Tuchel, and I think we thought going into this squad, particularly with the return to fitness of Jude Bellingham, who's now recovered from his shoulder surgery and is now playing again for Real Madrid, albeit working his way back into the team. Mm-hmm. And with Phil Foden playing for Man City, scoring goals, looking a bit more like his old self, those two in particular, you would think that they would come back in. The first opportunity Tuchel has to use them, there you go, and maybe a Gibbs White or a Morgan Rogers or Jarrod Bowen or someone could drop out for them. Obviously, Madueke not there because of injury. But no, I think that was the most notable thing. When the team news, the squad news dropped at around 10 this morning, I was looking immediately for like surprises. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be the surprise call-up this time? Because normally Tuchel chucks a little surprise name in there that maybe we haven't thought of, like Loftus-Cheek before, and like
we thought maybe Nico O'Reilly, Tyreek Mitchell.
Exactly, but no, none of that this time. He clearly wants to reward players who he thinks have performed well for him, not just in matches but in the camps and the training sessions, and that's something that I asked him at the press conference today, and that's something that I asked him about earlier at the press conference today.
Hasn't started for Arsenal in the Premier League this season, did start in the Champions League this week. But if that situation continues... If that situation continues for the rest of the season, is that a problem for you and him?
It's then maybe becomes a problem for him, yeah. To just be a good citizen in camp will not be enough over the course of a year. He was a very good player in camp, a very good teammate in camp. But to just be a good teammate in camp can maybe not be enough to stay the whole year with us. There is, of course, you have to perform on club level on a regular basis. At the moment, in last camp, he got the credit. He got the credit that I was convinced that we have to take care of him and nominate him because we accelerated his career. It was our responsibility to call him in camp first place like last season, at the end of last season. So we stick to this. He was now part of a very successful camp. So he gets the reward for that. But as you remember, he was not part of the 20-man squad in the match in Serbia. Still, his behavior was outstanding, even if he was not part of the squad. His training attitude, his attitude to push and support the guys who were on the pitch was outstanding and on highest level. So, he's maybe one of the players who benefits from this decision to stick with the same squad, but the performance will be also key factor in the next month.
You've used
he benefits also from the proximity of the camps, that it's only 3 weeks ago.
This really gets down to an issue that I think comes up a lot with international football and the way that the England watching public engage with the national team. Every time pretty much that we get to a tournament, and even around these qualifiers and friendlies, but particularly when you get to a tournament, there is always a discussion, perhaps from people who haven't been paying attention too much throughout the qualification campaigns and stuff like that. Say, why is X player in the squad and not Y player in the squad? Mm-hmm. You know, this player is playing really well in the Premier League right now. He's on form. he should be in the squad ahead of this player who I don't think is playing as well. And quite often, that question ignores the fact that players who maybe aren't in great club form or might not be the biggest names, but for whatever reason have been included in England squads, perform well for England managers. It was a big thing with Southgate, and it's historically always a big thing. And it comes down to, does the England manager have to pick the best players available to him at any given time, or does he build a squad and reward loyalty and build relationships? And that, I think, at the moment is what we're seeing, and Tuchel was talking about it there. He wants to reward the guys, but he wants to challenge the guys to keep their places in the squad. And he also probably wants to say to the likes of Foden, Grealish, Bellingham is a slightly different case. Bellingham will be in there. He's still not completely up to speed. He's not played loads of minutes since he's come back. But the likes of Foden, of Grealish, in particular, you've got to work to get in this squad. You can't just walk back into it. And it will be interesting to see as we get closer to that World Cup, when it really comes down to it, does he have the balls to leave someone out like Foden at the World Cup and say, Morgan Rogers has been there with me all the way through this qualification campaign, and just to use him as an example, he's going to get in ahead of Foden. And there might be other players you could have a similar conversation about. But at the moment, it's notable, how he is sticking with a pretty decent core of players.
I think there's a very strong chance that one of Foden or Palmer don't go to the World Cup. And that will obviously be a major talking point. They're both match winners for the best clubs in the world at their best.
So, on the last pod we did when we were trying to predict the World Cup squad, I was different to you and George in that I said, at the moment, I don't think Foden's in there. And then when we came away from that pod, almost immediately, Phil Foden started playing well for Man City, and I was thinking, oh God, I look stupid now. Of course Foden's going to go to the World Cup. But I've come away from this presser today thinking, no, you know what? Maybe I was right. Maybe I should have backed myself. Maybe he is in the balance.
It's not a game of musical chairs where at the very end, just before the World Cup, whoever's been playing best in the Premier League that season gets in the team, and then England win the World Cup with those players who've been the best club players. Tuchel is a manager that clearly wants to build a sort of understanding amongst the players on the pitch, which everyone knows is important for winning football matches at any level, right to the very top of winning a World Cup. He has had 8 games so far, and he's only got another, let's say, 5, 6, 7 until the World Cup starts. So we also know there is no England team feasible that could start a match with Saka, Palmer, Foden and Bellingham all in the team. So we know from the outset that these players are going to have to accept that they can't all be stars because it does not work playing them all in the same team. And it's just he spoke, and I think this should be brought in as part of the conversation. We shouldn't talk about the players and then talk about the tactics as if they're separate, because they are important. He is talking because he's a guy who loves coaching and coaching a team to play in the way that he wants. He's been talking about trying to get the messaging into the players, trying to get them understanding how they should play in the way that he wants them to play to be the best team that they can be. And if you think like that, if you were managing England and you prioritised coaching players to play together for England and seeing them do so, it would be really hard to get your head around bringing someone in that you have not seen either, that hasn't been part of the group at all because of injury, or when they haven't played very well. I think we all get the sort of slight bias of the player that's not in the team. I think we always think about the best case scenario for them. So Foden at the moment, he's doing what he's done and what we've seen him do for Man City quite a lot, and that is score lovely goals from 20 yards in a system that he's very comfortable in. But he's never done that for England. So if we're transposing the best version of Phil Foden onto England at the World Cup, it looks great, but that's very rarely what actually happens. I think we should be prioritising the players that perform for England under Tuchel in big games, and you couldn't have got much more pressure on the game than they had against Serbia for a World Cup qualifier, and they played absolutely brilliantly, and they won 5-0. I think it would have been pretty insane to drop a lot of the players who put in that display only 3.5 weeks ago as well, let's remember. So it's not like loads of football has happened between now and then. I'm more than happy with the decision to keep it Same. We've obviously got one more camp in November, so it'd be really interesting to see if he holds his nerve for the November squad, if we win both these games and we do so comfortably and handsomely and continuing to develop the relationships between, Anderson and Rice, Rodgers and Rashford, those sorts of players. I think it's a really interesting time right now. But frankly, once you make the decision that consistency is important to you and that the people who performed 3 weeks ago should have the chance to do so again, I don't think there's that much to argue about when it comes to bringing new players in and a sort of turnover of players. Bellingham, he explained away basically as like, he's not in the best rhythm yet for Real Madrid. He's had surgery.
Big rhythm guy, Thomas Tuchel, isn't he?
He loves rhythm.
Loves a bit of rhythm.
He loves rhythm. He's made one start. He's played 100 minutes. That they'll be able to tell when he's at his best and they decide that he's not at his best. I imagine if he starts another 4 games, he'll be back in the squad in November, and Gibbs-White would probably be the obvious one to drop out. What's interesting for me to think about is, what if Madueke wasn't injured? Would Saka have come back in place of Madueke? Probably not. Would he have come back in place of Bowen? Probably. But his injury actually allows Tuchel... Madueke's injury allows him to get away with this, like, we wanted the exact same squad where possible. Yeah. Whereas, if Madueke wasn't injured but Saka was back, you wouldn't be able to say that as definitively if he was reintegrated back into the squad. I think my main issue, Dave, is I don't know why we've got 5 centre-backs in the squad. It feels like a bit of a waste of a slot to me, albeit I understand there's 24 players in the squad rather than 23, so Kwanzaa seems like a bit of a kind of +1, almost brought along for experience as much as anything else. But we've got Stones and Kwanzaa, and then the 3 that have played most of the football under Tuchel, which is Konsa, Gehi, and Dan Burn. I don't really see the point in having 5 centre-backs for these 2 games. I don't, we'll probably play... I'll be interested to see who starts against Latvia in the game that actually matters on a competitive standpoint and a qualification standpoint, because in the last camp we saw Gehi start both games, one with Burn, one with Konsa. For me, that's the main competition right now. You chuck John Stones into the mix, who Tuchel absolutely adores, and I still think there's quite a lot up in the air at centre-back, even if they've all broadly performed pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, Stones had to pull out the last camp, obviously, so I think Tuchel will be keen to use him if he can. He's not played yet for England under Thomas Tuchel. He was again referenced today as... in an answer about, I think the question was from Henry Winter about, can England win the World Cup without Jude Bellingham? Thomas Tuchel basically said, well, look, players can get injured. Like Declan or Harry or John Stones could get injured just before the World Cup and we have to go without them. So he's in that bracket of our sort of, if fit, untouchable players, I think. I think Stones is there. But if you look at the squad... it's close to being really neat, 2 players in every outfield position, with the exception of the fullbacks, because there's only 3 fullbacks. But maybe Konsa could double up as an emergency fullback if we needed him. But you've got, so to run through the squad just in full, in case anyone hasn't seen it in full yet: Henderson, Pickford, Trafford in goal. Centre backs: Burn, Gehi, Kwanzaa, Stones and Konsa. Fullbacks: Lewis Skelly, Reece James and Jed Spence. Obviously, there's a lot, Spence can play both sides.
Should be a big opportunity for Spence here. Should probably get minutes in both games. Definitely, I would imagine a start in the friendly. I'm looking forward to seeing him.
Yeah, and I asked about Lewis Skelly. We'll get onto him in a bit more detail later. Midfielders, got Anderson, Gibbs-White, Henderson, Loftus-Cheek, Rice and Morgan Rogers. Forwards, we've got Bowen and Saka on the right, Gordon and Rashford off the left, Kane and Watkins as the strikers, and Eze as number 10, but could potentially play off the left. So you basically got Eze and, let's say, Konsa as the 2 sort of floaters who could play in a few different positions, but everyone else is kind of nailed down as like 1 and 2 for that position on that part of the pitch. But what I find is interesting at the moment, the reaction to this selection broadly and anecdotally from like WhatsApp groups and a bit of engagement we've had on Twitter and stuff, is that you've got 2 camps sort of forming. You've got the people that look at the squad and think, why is Henderson in the squad still? Why is Loftus-Cheek in the squad? Where's Wharton? Where's Curtis Jones? Like, where are these players who we think are better than these other guys who are still there? And then you've got the other group, which are like, no, you know what? Fair play. Like, he's sticking to his guns. He's choosing his guys. He's not picking players on reputation and what they might have done in the past or their best case scenario ability. And that is quite an interesting split. And I think the closer we get to the World Cup, that will become more pronounced as well.
Yeah, thinking about it, Loftus-Cheek is the main beneficiary from Tuchel's big decision to change as little as possible, because he didn't play in either game. He was a late drafted in for Wharton, who pulled out through injury, and is clearly a massive beneficiary of this idea that Tuchel's keen to put forward, that the vibes were just immaculate in that last camp, and he doesn't want to mess with the vibe, basically. So Loftus-Cheek's obviously just a great citizen within the camp. That was the word he used to describe Miles Lewis-Skelly. One of the two questions that you were able to ask Tuchel in the press conference was about Lewis-Skelly, and it pertains to other players in this squad as well. The idea of how important is it, long term and with the World Cup in mind, for players to be nailed on starters for their club.
You've used a lot of players so far. I mean, some of that's down to injuries, some of that's down to choices. But as we move through the camps and get closer to next summer, will you look to have a more consistent group? And could we run out of time for players like Grealish, like Foden, who haven't been in the squad?
Well, we do now. Yeah, we do now. It's a change in our selection. It's the World Cup year. We selected a lot of players, 35, 36 in the first two camp. I told you it was a learning from me. We reached a new level. We reached new standards for ourselves in the last camp, in the way we and I think it was clearly visible in the match at Serbia, for our fans and for us, in the way we played and the way we won. And so the question is also, why not to pick the same players? Why not to pick the same squad if they are available? So they have to prove again. They have to prove the point again. The pressure is on the players who want to be in camp, but the pressure is always on the guys who are selected. They set the standards. Now they have to make sure that these standards become more stable, and this is the chance that they have.
I quite liked that answer. Lewis-Skelly doesn't become a poor player just because he's not playing for Arsenal, who are one of the best teams in the world. He's been a real positive for England under Tuchel, and is someone that we should be unbelievably excited about playing for England for the next decade or more. For me, there was no reason to drop him at this point just because he hasn't been playing for Arsenal. I find it hard, or he hasn't been starting games in the league for Arsenal. I find it difficult to imagine he's completely lost all of his rhythm and confidence and quality because of that. But of course, if he only starts 3 Premier League games, it's going to be a pretty tough sell, particularly because with 3 camps quite close together, it's quite easy to go for the continuity approach. But then there's another 4 months between November and March, and that's where someone like Lewis-Skelly is probably going to have problems.
Yeah, and if in that gap Lewis Hall has played really well for Newcastle and has played a lot of minutes, if Nico O'Reilly keeps getting serious minutes for Man City, he's in the under-21 squad, listed as a midfielder actually, but would be another contender for the left-back spot. Jed Spence is there. Tino Livramento, his injury doesn't look as bad as we feared at the start. There was some talk about maybe ACL. Same with Madueke. It looks like a similar situation. Both injuries initially feared as ACLs. Scans come back and said, bit of damage, but not too bad. A few months maybe. Should be back soonish. So, yeah,
love the idea that that's what it says on the scan.
Yeah,
bit of damage, but fine.
Soonish.
But not as bad as you thought.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it is, and I think Tuchel did acknowledge that in that answer. It's not a problem right now. We like him. He's a good player. We want to keep him with us. But if he really has a season where he's only playing here and there, and maybe, the Champions League, he started against, is it Olympiacos in the Champions League in the week? But even that is not really high level compared to top-end Premier League games. So, yeah, interesting for Lewis-Skelly. He has got a bit of competition there. But we'll see how he deals with it.
So the big name within the press conference was Jude Bellingham. A large proportion of the questions focused on Bellingham, and initially, why is he not in the squad now that he's back? And
I thought that was a bit strange, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I can see why it keeps coming up. And in the last press conference ahead of the last two games, Tuchel was asked about his comments that he'd made in an interview with TalkSport, where he said sometimes Bellingham can be repulsive. And that was like a big thing, and it got really blown up. We've talked about it before on the pod. And I thought Tuchel sort of dealt with that in the last camp, but this come up again because he's not in the squad. And I suppose it's logical for journalists to ask that question, but it surely seems to me quite obvious that the reason he's not in the squad right now is because he's not fully up to speed.
But what they would like to try and tease out of Tuchel somehow is this sort of soap opera that they would like to brew, I think, or some people seem to enjoy, which is the concept that Bellingham doesn't fit that well in with the team spirit. And I'm uneasy with it as well. I wish there were fewer questions about Jude Bellingham, because I think there were more worthy topics to ask. And there's this sort of real, like, trying to fill in gaps or make assumptions and second guess things that Tuchel says. So, for example, when he says the team spirit in the last camp was unbelievable, there's a certain person that goes, because Bellingham wasn't there, and so Tuchel thinks that he's a disruptive influence in the camp. And, like, personally, obviously I understand that Tuchel is not going to say definitively if Bellingham is a disruptive force in the camp. So we may never truly know. But I am always uneasy about this the soap opera aspect of it, although I must accept that's just how it works in this country and always has.
No, I get it. I do get why those questions would be asked. And you're right. You're not necessarily asking that question expecting Thomas Tuchel to go, he's not in the squad because I don't like him, and he can be a bit disruptive, and he's got an attitude or whatever, which I'm not suggesting that's the case, but if that was the case, Tuchel wouldn't say it plainly in public like that. So you're trying to tease out and just explore and sort of see if there's any inference from his answers and stuff, and I don't think there was really today. And I think he has got a convenient explanation with the fact that he's we don't necessarily need him for these two games. We do know that if he's fully fit, he's going to be starting for England at the World Cup. Like, he's one of our best players. Obviously, he's just, for what it's worth, he just won the 24-25 England Player of the Year a few days ago. But yeah, it is that was an interesting sort of line of questioning, and it's interesting to see Tuchel sort of. I could see he did make reference to, like, thanks for bringing it up again, sort of thing. Like, are we really going through this again? But that's the job. Like, that's just the way it goes. But I think, I as I said at the start, I think there are some big name players who might be in danger of not going to the World Cup for various reasons. But Jude Bellingham is surely not one of them.
Yeah, I thought we might see O'Reilly. He's been the big blind spot of this pod. Probably not mentioned even as a potential when we sort of went through the World Cup squad predictions, and then instantly was starting and is still starting every game for Man City at left back, including massive games, the Manchester derby, both Champions League games so far. It's really exciting when someone like Guardiola and a team like Man City decide this guy is good enough to be starting in massive games. Like, that is hugely significant for England to have a player who's still eligible for the under-21s and is indeed in the under-21 squad. Of course, you can't always just get them in to have a look at them. And I wondered whether Tuchel might use Livramento's injury as a reason to do that. Could have been a reason to take a look at Tyrick Mitchell, but I get the sense that Mitchell probably won't get a look at any point really unless there's a number of injuries. But it's obviously exciting that O'Reilly has emerged. And I guess in the context of Lewis Skelly as well, also being a young left-back who's played in midfield at youth level, who's now not playing for Arsenal, just as O'Reilly comes into the City team. It's another area of the pitch where there's at least still a conversation to be had. And, that's kind of what's keeping us going at the moment. At the centre of midfield is still a discussion point, still people who just can't really accept Jordan Henderson being in the squad over Adam Wharton.
A couple of assists for Brentford lately.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
nice long balls over the top.
Well, if one of the knocks was he's playing in Saudi or he's playing for Ajax, that's not comparable to Premier League football, then clearly that argument has now vanished because he is starting games in the Premier League like Adam Wharton is when he's fit. Wharton's, the slightly unspoken thing about Wharton is that the timing of his injuries have been absolutely horrendous and they really scuppered him. There's no doubt, that had Wharton been fully fit for the last 2 years, he would have played quite a lot of England games and Elliot Anderson would be, a figment of our imagination, probably. Instead, Elliot Anderson is now, flavour of the month and likely to start in whichever game Tuchel thinks is more important here and starts a first team, likely to try and develop that relationship with Declan Rice. I think everyone's on board with that after how he played in the last 2 games. So, Wharton, obviously I want to see Wharton. Obviously, I think he should be in the squad over Henderson from a footballing point of view. Obviously, Tuchel needs Henderson there from a leadership perspective, which, is just, it depends how much you value that sort of stuff. And I think it's hard to do so from the outside from a fan point of view. And then it's kind of Loftus-Cheek, and there's people saying, well, surely Wharton be in over Loftus-Cheek, just a better player, better passer. But I wonder if you really drill down whether Tuchel sees it essentially as Henderson and Anderson as the 6s, and Rice and Loftus-Cheek as the 8s, Wharton being more of a 6. So again, it's not so much just centre midfielders, pick your best 4. I think he thinks it even more specifically in terms of roles and having enough cover in each role and not having a surplus of number 8s or right wingers when you can only play 1 or max 2 at any given time.
Yeah, Gibbs White and Rodgers in the mix as well there. Potentially could be 8s, could be 10s, could be 11s. Potentially. Wharton is such a funny one. Like, I know you and George in particular, big fans of him, followed him up at Blackburn and on his journey. And we got excited when Southgate surprisingly added him to the squad for the Euros, played a bit of football in those warm-up games against, was it Bosnia and Iceland, was it, before in the warm-up games? Didn't get on the pitch in the tournament. Mainu was the one who got on the pitch. A name we don't mention again, started for England in the Euros final, and just, that's a whole other story. But
it's actually insane. Yeah. We might have to do a whole pod on this. Yeah. It's insane how much things change in a shorter period of time than you can get your head around. Like, even I always think my main way of demonstrating this in England terms is that wonderful 2018 World Cup campaign where Jesse Lingard and Dele Alli were starting in literally starters in the team, and at that time were in their early to mid-20s and were completely gone within a couple of years, and now barely exist in terms of England conversation. It's mental how quickly things change.
It is, and so in that respect, perhaps Wharton doesn't need to be too worried, and that things can change, and maybe his time will come, even if it isn't this World Cup. But if it might not be a shootout between Henderson and Wharton, as you say, because of the way that Tuchel looks at the positions and the profiles that he wants. But if neither Henderson nor Wharton is going to play significant minutes in the World Cup, I'm happy with Tuchel taking Henderson for whatever those benefits are, the leadership qualities that he says he have. If they are genuinely helping the group, better to take him than to have a young midfielder in Wharton who maybe you could bring on as a sub if we needed him in a particular game against a particular opponent and we want his passing. So maybe that is an option, and maybe there's room for them both. But if it was one or the other, I would understand why you would prioritise in 2 players who are maybe both unlikely to play serious minutes. I'm going to prioritise the guy that gives me some other stuff that I need.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really, really good point, and something that we often end up having to come back to, which is often the discussions of the players being included or omitted we're basically having discussions about players that wouldn't see significant minutes anyway, because, well, hopefully by another camp or two's time, we will start to broadly have a starting 11 in mind. I think that's important.
So another player moving forward who's in a similar sort of space, I think, is Jarrod Bowen. A player who continues to play really well for West Ham. Scores goals, creates goals. He's one of their main players, really. And he's, it doesn't feel like he's past the point now where he's going to get a big move up to a big club. So like that's where he is. Never lets anyone down, but he still keeps getting into England squads, and he still keeps getting on the pitch here and there. But it just still feels that like he's never going to be a properly impactful player for England in a major tournament. I can't see him starting games for England at a major tournament when you've got Saka there, when you might have Madueke, who has played well.
just leapfrogged him in the pecking order, didn't he? Without Bowen even really having a chance to prove it.
Exactly, and you can't even you still can't rule out a Foden or Cole Palmer being shoehorned into that right-hand side as well. And I think Bowen is someone that loses out just because there's so many people around him. But he hangs in there, and he still keeps getting picked. We didn't get a chance to ask Tuchel about him today, but I'd love to know in a bit of detail from Tuchel about what do you think about a player like Jarrod Bowen? What do you think about him?
I really love him, but I don't I'd be honest, I'm not in love with him as an England player. He's not someone that, for me, although I'm sympathetic to the fact that he's always had Saka in front of him, and then when Saka got injured, Madueke leapfrogged him. I have sympathy with the fact that he doesn't seem massively relevant as a serious starter or someone who's going to get serious minutes, certainly if everyone is fit. So I just see him as if it was a 50-man squad every time, there'd be the players who just missed out, that were the fifth choice in their position, and I just see him as the third, fourth choice in his position and unlikely to get any higher than that because he can't play much better at club level. And I think the type of player that he is as well, I know there are people that disagree with this, but because I think he is sometimes seen as not the dynamic, powerful 1v1 dribbler of Madueke, which a lot of managers really prioritise in wide forward roles, Tuchel being one of them. Obviously, Saka is just an all-round world-class talent in every part of the game. I think people see Bowen more as a goal scorer, basically, from wide areas. And in loads of teams, that's a really great thing to have and a really important role to have. But it feels like in the England team, for whatever reason, we don't necessarily want a player like that playing in the wide forward role. And if we do, we probably want it on the left side where, we don't have a Saka who generally is considered to be the kind of nailed on starter. So, yeah, I kind of basically, if Madueke was fit, I think Bowen might have dropped out of the squad altogether. I think if everyone's fit, Palmer included, I don't think there's a place for Bowen in the squad, and that's a shame to say, but that's what I believe. So we got a game against Wales, a friendly on Thursday at Wembley. We're going to be there. This game is an Alzheimer's Society International, so a really strong tie-in with the Alzheimer's Society, and something that the FA are taking really seriously is supporting this charity. And one of the ways in which they're doing that, which I think people will have seen a promotional video that went out this week that was incredibly touching and heartwarming. And it's a really interesting thing that they're doing, Dave, where the players and both sets of players will walk out not with child mascots, but with dementia sufferers. And then in the second half, the players will play without names on the backs of their shirt. Clearly, memory loss, one of a number of really difficult aspects that people who live with, or people who live with those who live with dementia have to deal with. And I think it's going to be incredibly poignant and powerful, and it's something that we're really looking to support as well, along with the FA and this fixture.
Yeah, I think it's a really great campaign. It should be really powerful on Thursday when you see those people walking out with the players, and we've been chatting to the Alzheimer's Society, and I think one of the things they're keen to emphasise with this campaign is that dementia and Alzheimer's, it's very easy to assume that it just affects people who are quite old, and you have an image in your head of a really elderly person who's struggling with it, but it can affect people who are a bit younger. there is no real necessary pattern to when it hits or how severe the symptoms might be. There are a range of symptoms. It's not just memory loss. There are other things that happen, the other symptoms that people experience as well. And it touches a lot of people. I know people who've been, have had family members, had parents, had grandparents who've gone through it. We both do. So it's an important thing to get behind, and it's great to see that the FA and England, are doing this. So it should be a really powerful and hopefully really a useful thing, because I bet there's lots of people out there who may have family members or even themselves who think, I think I might know someone who might have Alzheimer's or has symptoms that are what I perceive to be, could be something like that. If you go on the Alzheimer's Society website, there's a really good checklist of like symptoms, like, are they experiencing this, and this? And then if so, maybe speak to your GP. And I think that's really useful information for people, because it's very easy to be scared about this stuff and to think, maybe to ignore it or whatever. So get the information, find out, and see if you can get help.
That's exactly it. The game itself should be, as friendlies go, I think home to Wales is pretty much top tier, just in terms of the occasion. Should be amazing. The Welsh fans, travel well, I think it's fair to say, and I hope that they do bring a great atmosphere, because I think that will force the England fans into providing the same. The team selection will, of course, be interesting. Our last friendly against Senegal was an unmitigated disaster. Interestingly, I think that Wales as a team, in terms of the threats that they will pose to England, are the most like Senegal that we've played, in that speed on the break, with Brennan Johnson and Dan James in particular. Sorba Thomas has been brilliant for Wales under Craig Bellamy. They've got good players all over the pitch, even if we're expected to dominate this game. And, this is definitely a no complacency, take their counter-attacking threat very, very seriously, because I've got bad memories of a game against Greece under Lee Carsley, where they broke on us quickly and we couldn't handle it. I've got bad memories of that game against Senegal, where they attacked with speed and quality, and we found it really, really difficult. The games that we've played, mostly under Tuchel, we've had 75% possession and faced 2 shots in total in almost all of our qualifying games so far. So we can't assume that that's how football matches look. It's not how they'll look when we get to the business end of any major tournaments that we may or may not get to. And so I really would love to see the team take this very, very seriously. Selection-wise is interesting, because there's a part of me that would like to see to see some of those that haven't started games, maybe in the last camp, get a start, so we can see a proper 60 minutes from certain players. Then again, Tuchel, in the last camp, when we had Andorra and then Serbia, and the suggestion was put to him that he might save the big guns for Serbia because it's a quick turnaround and fatigue and stamina and stuff. And he said, no, we play our best team against Andorra. When that game's out of the way, we'll start to think about Serbia and work out who's still fit to play and what issues we may have on that front. And only then will we, make any changes that we need. This situation is slightly different, but I think it's still worth making the point that, the Latvia game is away from home, comes with challenges, and also a World Cup qualifier, which, we need to win.
Yeah, this friendly game is not a game that you can just dismiss. It's not a game that Tuchel can overlook. He can't experiment too much. He's got to be conscious, as you said, of Wales's threats. 9 times out of 10, you should still expect to beat Wales. But if he was to lose them, it would be damaging for him. Mm-hmm. There would be a lot of questions to answer. There'd be more people doubting, the Tuchel era for England and what's the identity. All those questions would surface again. So it's a game that he needs to take seriously. He's conscious of that. He referenced it today. He said that it's, almost not a friendly. Obviously the national rivalry and the pride and all that stuff. So yeah, interesting game. I wonder if, as you say, like maybe Jed Spence plays in this game. Mm-hmm. If Wales are going to have pace in wide areas. Tuchel has spoken of that.
I think that would be a really, really good decision.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if we might see another goalkeeper in this game. Maybe Dean Henderson, who played.
Oh, come on, James.
Against
Come
Senegal.
on, Trafford. It's
nice
your moment.
It'd be lovely to see James Trafford. I wonder if we might see John Stones, will he put him straight into the qualifier because he loves John Stones to bits and he thinks he's incredible? Or will Stones get a go in the friendly first and Gahey and Konza and Byrne continue to be the ones who are playing in the qualifiers? Might we see Ruben Loftus-Cheek play some minutes for England, or is he just there to look handsome and good vibes? Lots of interesting questions ahead of that game.
Is Jarell Quansah ever going to play for England? We need to find this out. He surely must be close to being the player who's been named in the most squads without ever getting on the pitch.
Outfielders, surely. Yeah, he'll be up there. Interesting. And then Latvia away. We'll talk about that game more when we react to whatever happens at Wembley against Wales. But just to mark your cards, that game, which is on Tuesday, the 14th of October, we want to watch it with you, just like we did the Serbia game. Very much don't change a winning formula. We had a really good time meeting a good dozen or so of you with no tube strikes this time round. We're expecting a lot more, and we had a really great time at The Volley in Old Street. It is just the perfect place to watch football. Great beers, good food if you want, and good company as well. So please do come and join us. We really would love that. And it's helpful for us and for The Volley if you could let us know somehow, either a comment on Spotify or YouTube or a tweet or an Instagram DM. If you could let us know if you're coming, that would be really helpful.
Come down, enjoy it. Come down, join us. One name before we finish that I don't think we've mentioned. I'm pretty sure we haven't mentioned, apart from in the squad, when I read out the squad, we've not mentioned Harry Kane today. And we've no reason to, really, because what is there to talk about with Harry Kane when it comes to England? He's a lock. He's going to play almost every minute if he can. But I feel like we should just mention how well he is playing at the moment. Yeah. The goals that he is scoring at the moment. What was it, 17 in 9, I think, this season? And there was a video that went a bit viral on TikTok the other day. Forgive me, I don't know the creator who did this, but he was basically saying, why does no one ever put Harry Kane forward as being the best player in the world? Look at all the goals he's scoring. And you can get bogged down in it's only the Bundesliga, it's only against Hamburg or whoever. But just from a pure numbers and output point of view, and in the Champions League as well, there have been times when George in particular, but all three of us have speculated and sort of pondered about an England without Harry Kane. Should we consider maybe not playing Harry Kane? And it seems mad now, where we are now, that we ever sort of had those conversations. They may come back round again at the end of the season if he's tired and he gets an injury, like he's in a good position at the moment. But
don't rewrite history, Dave. We saw what we saw when Kane doesn't play well, and there have been times where he hasn't played well for England, while also being our record ever goal scorer and one of the best goal scorers ever.
Yeah.
But we saw what we saw.
But you've come round to it, though, haven't you? I mean, you are much more pro Harry Kane now than you were a year ago, I would say.
I'm probably... Well, I'm just bringing it up a bit less. I am deep down interested to see how England look with a different striker at the top of the pitch, because... modern football is awash with teams that don't use their number 9 as the one that scores 50% of their goals. And with Kane in the team, that is kind of broadly how we look and how we've always looked. But I've made my peace with it. He's an absolutely astonishing finisher. He's obviously way more than that as well, and such a clever player. I love him. And, one of the interesting points from that video I thought was he has no PR. He has no campaigns behind him. Any adverts he's done have not been particularly.
Plays in Skechers boots.
He plays in Skechers boots. It's a matter of taste whether you think that's a bit lame and a bit embarrassing, or like a really good measure of the man. And people have different theories on that. So, yeah, I'm put it this way. Within myself, I'm trying to remind myself as often as possible how brilliant it is that we created this footballer, and what an unbelievable example he is of how to work your way to the top, because it certainly wasn't handed to him. And even early on in his career with those loans in the EFL, this wasn't silver platter stuff for Kane. And so, we should absolutely mention that his goal scoring record is like next level Messi in his prime type stuff right now. And that's very, very cool. And hopefully, because I'm sure he'll start against Wales and I'm sure he'll start against Latvia, hopefully he scores 2 or 3 or maybe more goals for England across these 2 games. That would be fantastic. And we know we've got Watkins as someone who can win a game off the bench if we need him, which he did in our wonderful night in Dortmund, summer 2024. So, hope you've enjoyed this. Just sort of chewing on some of the decisions made by Thomas Tuchel and then some of the conversations that have sprouted from those decisions. Do let us know in the comments, always, please, what you think about the pod, what you'd like us to talk about in future. We really like hearing from you, and let us know what you're enjoying and what you'd like to see more of. We're all England all the time, and we got 2 games on the horizon. Hope you're looking forward to them. We certainly are. Cheers, and go well.
Come on, England.